Hello. Just give us a few minutes. I have our technicians finish getting everyone on. I think everyone that's on. We're still waiting. Give us a few more minutes, please. We're going to be looking into the prism lens of 5 essential principles that must lead the way in schools reopening. Fighting for the soul of our children in our community. Whether you use the term hybrid model or some other newly acquired term when speaking of this unique position in which America and the world has been placed in post the break of COVID-19, coronavirus pandemic, schooling deliberations, we will inevitably end up at a synonymous learning and pandemic pod. These words have quickly become the new normal. When parents talk about school and education for this fall, every school district is scrambling to figure out how to deliver quality instruction while keeping the students, families, and educators safe from COVID-19. The face of a dizzy array of conflicting choices, and maddeningly, there are no simple solutions or cures as of this writing. The entire school dilemma is like a probable house of cards. We gently pull out a single card and the entire creation collapses. Nationwide, school closures have not only disrupted millions of lives, they have further enriched long-standing disparities in our public school system, especially rural America countries like that of Hope County. North Carolina, students who are already vulnerable are at even greater risk. Policymakers, educators, families, and students face impossible choices as our nation balances the urgent need to protect people from a deadly pandemic with the responsibility to deliver on the promise of a high quality education for all. Like so many of us, my deep Christian faith drives the way I inherently view inequality, especially the inequities in public education. I grew up in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and saw disparities outside my front door and throughout my community. As a Black girl and teenager, I was actually aware that the kids in my neighborhood weren't getting the same education that my white suburban friends received. As my faith became more important to me, I looked for ways to integrate my core Christian beliefs with the inequities that most pain me. I still view education disparities as inherently un-Christlike. If we truly believe that all Christians are made in God's image and likeness, Genesis 1:27, then people of faith should ensure that our schools allow all students to flourish. especially in times of unfathomable national crisis. The deep educational inequities that are being laid bare by COVID-19 in the stimulus national reckoning around race are embedded in the very foundation of our education system. Within weeks after the March shutdown, we were confronted with millions of food insecure students who no longer had access to their free lunch program, and families without technology to effectively do online schooling in some large school districts. Thousands of economically disenfranchised students simply disappeared from the virtual class rolls. While our nation evaluates the right approach to embarking on the 2020-2021 school year and debates the merits of various reopenings approaches, we must not lose sight of the broader moral picture. As Hope County's leading faith-rooted candidate on this subject matter, Dr. Deltarina V. Carr is mobilizing a grassroots community of people of faith to advocate for educational equity. The campaign to elect Deltarina V. Carr, Hope County Board of Education Policy Committee, believes that the moral test of our education system is whether we prioritize our most vulnerable students. Motivated by our faith and values, we encourage people of faith to advocate for and urge decision makers to embrace these 5 principles as schools decide to reopen. Prioritize the needs of vulnerable students and families. Low-income families are more likely to be harmed by COVID-19 and decreased learning opportunities. The federal government should provide school districts that have more low-income students with additional funding to make up for academic loss during the last school year. If schools mandate distance learning, subsidized childcare or emergency paid leave must be available for families with elementary students. To this point, one of our nation's leading governors who laid out one of the best options in which schools should consider before reopening in the fall. Governor Roy Cooper announced Wednesday that he will use his share of federal COVID-19 education aid on programs such as hiring more nurses, academic programs for at-risk K-12 students, and providing tuition assistance for post-secondary students. The money comes from North Carolina's share of the governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund, a part of the Federal CARES Act. 1, stabilize public school budgets with emergency funding. The pandemic has devastated the budgets of most public school districts with little emergency financial relief. Our public schools have risen to meet the moment and should be eligible for emergency federal funds. 2, provide all schools with more resources for in-person and/or distance learning. The challenges of educating in the midst of a global pandemic require more funding, not less. 3, center the voices of students, families, and educators in decisions. We cannot make informed and holistic decisions without bringing all parties to the table. This includes student, family, and educators surveys and feedback sessions, allowing families and educators some choice and flexible to make decisions best for their situation. Quite remarkable, more than 80% of parents answered the Hope County Board of Education survey, and teachers and other faculty alike. And the majority of Hope County parents and teachers taken in a whole, simple, annoyed by the current superintendent and voting school board officials during a virtual online vote had to send children into harm's way. We as board members are not the final arbiters of our students. The parents and teachers who strive so hard to collaborate school and solutions are. 4, respect and value educators and school leaders. Our educators are heroes. Threatening to suspend teachers' contracts or withhold funding from schools that choose distant learning is a clear, bright line that we cannot cross. With all the important discussions about how and when to reopen schools safely, we are missing a significant need in communities of faith. Don't help kids deal with the broader socio-emotional trauma from economic uncertainty. Disconnect them from school communities in grief. The rate of loss and death from COVID-19 is staggering, and like so much else, it is uniquely distributed along racial lines. Nearly 1/3 of Black Americans report knowing someone who died of COVID-19 compared to only 9% of white Americans. The resultant grief is uniquely complicated in part because coronavirus discussion and implications are literally inescapable. I've had several family members close to my heart who died of COVID-19. And my younger sister, who is also an educator, contracted this deadly virus from one of her students. She loved teaching and nearly lost her life. Like every other victim family, our children and grandchildren had to grieve their deaths in a disjointed and sudden manner. If they had the added trauma of economic or food insecurity, I cannot imagine the extent to which those combined factors would have impacted beloved children and grandchildren emotional readiness for school this fall. Hundreds of thousands of students will bring severe emotional trauma back to school with them, including COVID-19 grief. Faith communities should play a role in advocating that these students receive additional support to process all they've experienced. Unfortunately, a host of pastors and churches, community leaders who has a major voice that must be heard are not stepping up to this moral call of Christian and civic duty. However, and blessedly so, Dr. Deltarina's Carr campaign focus committee has learned of some congregations who set up virtual counseling centers to support families and children with grief support as they lost family members to COVID-19. Places of worship are offering free virtual tutoring to students. Congregations have organized funds to purchase laptops for students who don't have technology. And so far, our campaign organization has seen thousands of our faith-motivated constituents take over 36 advocacy actions in the last few months. They are pushing their elected way officials to prioritize the most vulnerable students during and after this pandemic. Our voice and actions matter. I have worked in education for more than 2 decades, and I have seen the level of national conversation about schools that I see in the moment. This is an opportunity to reimagine what the education system could look like after or even during COVID-19. It is an important opportunity to right historical and systemic wrongs to ensure that all of God's children receive the education they deserve. I pray that we arise to the occasion. I am prepared to not only advocate visionary change, I'm actively working the work of such even now following the November 3rd, 2020 election. Make your voices be heard resoundingly. Elect Dr. Deltarina V. Carr to the Hope County Board of Education as your voice. Your vote and your access to fighting for the educational soul of our children and community. You can visit us online at www.electdeltarina.v.carr, that's DELTARINA, V. Carr, CARR, Hope County Board of Education.com. Our campaign phone number is 910 848-1133. And I thank you for your time. And remember, vote Carr on November 3rd. Thank you and have a blessed day.